just paint. Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of Just Paint. This is going to be painting in the wild. Now, we're set up on a downtown street in Calgary. The event is the Canadian Artists for the Poor. As such, as this is a closed street, what we have is a lot of pedestrian traffic going by in the background, and that may or may not distract us. What we're going to do, of course, first is we're going to lay down some primary colors and get the painting rolling. Now we're going to only use one brush. It's an angled tip about a 1 inch wide and one palette knife to complete this entire painting. Now we've chosen a sunrise sunset style coloring for the top, and we're going to do a mountain scene in the bottom. The reason we do a lot of mountain scenes is we're in Calgary, Alberta. We're really close to the mountains. The Rockies stand out. You can see them from almost any part of the city. Now we're going to run a limited palette on this. This is only going to be approximately 8, maybe 9 colors in total. We're just using very wide brush strokes. All we're trying to do is blend in our background. Now, how we're doing this is we're mixing a little bit of paint with a lot of turpentine. What this allows us to do is just give us a general coloring in the background that we can work with. And we start down at the bottom, we start using our darker greens, and once again we're just going to lay it on with a lot of terps and just spread it out. This is all done rather quickly. Once again, just applying very wide, broad strokes to the canvas. This canvas size is approximately 18 by 24 inches. So it's a nice size to work with outside. A little easier to carry home at the end of the day. Now some people of course don't like turpentine. They like to use a terpenoid or something that doesn't have an odor. I prefer the actual real turpentine. I think it does a way better job, especially when you're mixing it as a medium. Now as you can see, we've started with a palette knife. We have a very small thin palette knife, and we're starting to apply reds into our sky color. And we'll slowly start blending in other colors. Now one of the main ideas that you have to focus on is that I do not have a set scene. I haven't created one. I'm not working off a picture. This comes purely from the imagination. And we're going to complete this painting rather quickly. The basic idea behind the Just Paint is just that. Apply paint to the canvas. Quit paying attention to all the small details around. Don't spend 3 or 4 weeks trying to decide what to paint. Get out your paint and start sticking it on the canvas. The whole idea here is to totally engage your right brain and allow it to do all the work. Now on a crowded city street, that could be a little tougher because people ask you questions. There's a lot of motion happening in the background. But if you truly tune into your right brain, all that becomes ignored. And you just do what it is that you're doing. With the palette knife now, what we're doing is just applying color on top of color. We're working everything very wet on wet. The main advantage to a palette knife is that on a wet surface you can slide things around, you can pull paint back up to give it textures, you can blend. We're also not striving for perfection. The style is abstract realism, so you can more or less make out what the objects in the painting actually are. But it's abstracted, and as well we're using a high level of impressionism to set up for the painting. And what we're doing is applying paint to wherever it seems appropriate. At the end of the video, we will show you a finished painting and what it actually looks like. On the video, because of lighting and everything else, the actual colors do not stand out as well as they possibly could. We're now starting to use some brown. We're just going to lay in some simple mountain shapes. All the mountain shapes that I'm using are taken from actual photos that I've taken, so I actually do have a certain idea of what some of these mountains actually around in given areas look like. But this is going to be an interpretation of all the mountains that I've seen in the general area around Banff. They don't quite look like mountains yet, but they will. What I'm doing is applying a darker brown over top of the lighter brown. Unfortunately, you can't see a lot with me standing in the way. Most of the mountains around Calgary and in the Rockies have snow on them almost year-round. So even at this time of year, which is July, if you look to the mountains, you'll still see a fair amount of snow on them, which is why I tend to actually put snow caps onto most of the mountains that I do. And when you're doing this, when you're blending with a palette knife, you can take your time or you can go fast. It really is up to you. But with the palette knife, we're applying more and more detail to the mountains. And the main reason I like palette knives is the ability to be able to slide paint around and on top of other paint. The painting is approximately about half finished now, and we're starting to get some nice detail happening in the mountains. It's contrasting well against the sky. For me, painting is all about the colors themselves and how the colors interact with each other. It's not really about the finer details of presenting something in absolute realism. There is some realism involved, but it's not as accurate as some other people may or may not do. And in future video series, what I'll try to do is angle everything differently so that, for the most part, you don't just see the back of me. And you see more of the painting and more of what's actually being done. As you can see, we've changed a few of the details into the front. We've lightened up a section that will serve as either a large open area or possibly it'll appear as being a lake of some sort. Interpretation is everything. My interpretation may not match somebody else's. So they may see that large open area as a meadow, or they may see it as a lake. The whole idea of painting outdoors is to change the environment that you're actually painting in, to see how it influences you. If you go out to a park, if you go to, say, out to the mountains like I do often, you may be inspired to paint. It doesn't mean you have to paint the scene that's around you. I'm not painting people. I'm painting a mountain scene which isn't even visible from this location. When painting, I have a tendency to paint top down, so you start with the sky and then slowly work down into the foreground. So now what we're doing is just roughing in some colors to change some of the contrasting in the foreground. Nothing really has an exact placement. We're just applying paint, applying color. And that was a clear example of paint sliding around on the canvas. Now, one of the things you have to know and understand when you're outside is you have a variety of environmental factors to contend with. At this point, it's a little windy. It's not really badly windy, so you don't have to hang onto the canvas with one hand and try and paint with the other. Now, the other thing I do not do is I do not pre-mix paint on my palette. I take all the raw colors and then put them on the canvas and mix them there. In this particular way, I get a different type of blending. And some of it's a rough blend, and others is a much finer blend. But with the palette knife, you can pull the paint at the same time. You can physically lift it from the canvas, and you can get part of the paint that's down there to come back into your palette knife. And what we're doing now with the palette knife at the bottom is putting in a suggestion of trees. Leading possibly to the illusion that it is actually a lake in the background. So now it's just a question of adding a little bit more detail. and soften up a bit of the foreground. We'll go back in and add a little bit more detail into the mountains. And we're going to use painter's gray to accomplish that. The results are whatever you want them to be. We move next into the sky because we want to change it up just a little bit and redefine it slightly and put in some angles to the paint. We do this by taking the palette knife, wiping it on a cloth so it's dry, and then just tapping into the paint. And perhaps we add just a touch extra color as we're doing it. That's pretty much the finished painting at this point. Thanks for watching.